Okay, welcome back. It's a new week. It's a new EventHubs podcast. And hey, last week we did a segment on Guilty Gear Strive, the tier lists. People really liked it, and so there's a lot of interest for that right now. Guilty Gear Strive has a lot of good momentum. Not everything about it is perfect, and if you check the front page, there's plenty of coverage there where there's having some issues with things like load times taking forever. I think it's like 2 to 3 minutes in some cases. And it's had its issues and such, but widely speaking, people are pretty dang happy with it. Now, but there has been a little bit of reservation about a few things, as always is the case when a new game in a numbered franchise comes about, and usually there's rumblings of it's not like the old ways, and so I automatically don't like it, or this is an issue, yada yada. Well, as these conversations have been going around, we've been hearing stuff like Guilty Gear Strive is the Street Fighter 5 of Guilty Gear titles, which that's impactful, especially right now in this point in time, because Street Fighter is, of course, very hot in everyone's minds. It's been a roller coaster in and of itself, and that's a fairly loaded statement. And so I have welcomed and since last week he's studied up and now become an expert in Guilty Gear Strive, Nicholas Majentin Shinhan Taylor. Welcome on yet again to the podcast. How are you this week?
Hey everyone, thanks for having me again. I'm doing all right. Just wrapped up the coverage for Topanga League, or Topanga Championship as it's called now. So if you enjoy Street Fighter 5, go check out the VODs of that if you weren't watching it live.
I need to, don't spoil it for me, but I hear it was there's a story either way because of one particular player just doing surprisingly amazingly. So then I'm gonna go do my research there and everything on EventHubs. Hey, go check it out. But yeah, so I hear it was really some really good action there.
For sure, yeah. The best Street Fighter 5 I've seen, to be honest.
Whoa, all right. So hey, Street Fighter 5, and not too bad of a place right now. But let's not get too far away from topic. Guilty Gear Strive, the Street Fighter 5 of Guilty Gear. Nick, I'm gonna let you kind of just take it wherever you want, start wherever you want. What does that mean to you?
I think it's a very accurate statement. I think anyone who says it probably has different reasons for saying it.
It's broad.
Yeah, it's a broad statement, right? Because when you say that, like, what do you actually mean? I think one of the most prevalent reasons why people say it is a certain thing in Guilty Gear Strive, which is the same in result, but not the same in execution as Street Fighter 5. So that's why I think it's kind of hard to put your finger on it, but you get this Street Fighter 5 feeling in a certain sense for some things. So I'm gonna try. I'm gonna explain this here, and I don't think this is necessarily a controversial opinion, but you never know. The comments might go a place.
Hopefully.
But one thing with Street Fighter 5, which a lot of people had problems with, started from when Ono was saying he wanted to level the playing field. That was like the goal with the game. Personally, I think that's an offensive statement to anyone who plays fighting games seriously, because you're basically saying, like, the people who put the time in aren't supposed to be good. Because you want everyone to be able to beat anyone. That's not possible to begin with. And I think that's what we've seen as well with Street Fighter 5, because the good players are still the good players, right?
They'll still take advantage of whatever the mechanic is,
Sure,
and be better at using that thing
yeah,
than someone else. Unless it's just an all-out coin flip, and then what are you doing?
exactly. So the way they went about this, or they did it in several ways, but one of the ways they went about it was that they limited the difficulty of combos, right? So if we say you and I are playing Street Fighter 4 and I whiff a DP, if you want to do a lot of damage to punish me there, I mean, if you were playing Cody, you could just do like crouching heavy punch, heavy criminal upper. That's a lot of damage. But if you want to do optimized damage, you're going to have to do something else, and that's going to be a lot more damage. If you look at Street Fighter 5, because of the buffer window and generally like how normals work, since you don't have proximity normals and stuff like that, it becomes a lot easier to have this DP punish. And at least in my experience, basically anyone who's above silver online is going to do like a full DP punish at any time.
The optimal DP punish,
Yeah.
get the maximum amount of damage
Like,
and meter gain and all that
yeah,
stuff.
possibly not absolutely optimal, but it's going to be like, you're going to lose like a lot of HP, right? It's not going to be like the, jab, oh, I screwed up my punish, now you got away with it, which is typical in fighting games in general. So that in that sense, making a mistake means it doesn't matter how good your opponent is, you're going to be heavily punished for it.
So what I'm getting is that it's high damage output and easy combos.
Yes, and the thing here, which is interesting, is that Guilty Gear Strive does it in a very different way. They do not have any buffer to make the combos easier. There are some very complex combos in Guilty Gear Strive, and I would
like one frame link complex.
Yeah. You need to do like very specific air dashes and stuff like that. Like it's more complex than a one frame link, I would say, in some scenarios. And this is very classically Guilty Gear. So in that sense, these things still exist. And I wouldn't say that any player who plays online in Guilty Gear Strive is going to do like the optimal combo, because there's going to be optimized stuff that does a lot of damage. What they instead did, which has the same end result, is that even though you're not doing the optimal super difficult combo, you can basically do slash to heavy slash to bandit bringer with soul, and that's going to be like 50% of your HP. Because
I'm seeing TODs all over the place.
Yeah, because damage is so high. Which means that, yeah, the difficult combos are still there, and they're going to be very situational, and they're going to be interesting, and, you know, sometimes people are going to close out rounds in a very hype way. But the same principle as we saw in Street Fighter 5 is there, which is if you make a small mistake, you're going to eat a lot of damage, even if this person hasn't actually been practicing.
Okay, now I was talking to one of my local friends about this, and this would have been maybe 2 weeks ago or so, but I had heard this idea that the damage output was ridiculously high and that everyone is scary. Everyone is, you know, V-trigger activated towards the end of the round. Does one slip up, like you're saying, could end things. But then they said, but it is balanced out in Strive because there are multiple defensive mechanics that give you a legitimate second chance at fielding these things, even when they're either incoming or even maybe when they're already happening. You know, like push block kind of stuff, or is it like dusting, things like that. So, but I know we brought it up, or I brought it up with you, and you said that's not quite how things work. But how do you reconcile those two things?
Well, my first question is this friend of yours you were talking to, did they play Guilty Gear before Strive?
I believe so.
Okay. Because usually people who did play Guilty Gear before Strive are actually going to say the defensive options are fairly limited because they toned them down. A lot of things are... I mean, you do have several defensive options, but there are problems attached to them that weren't there before. So you have the burst. The burst is similar to what it used to be. I would say that the only real big difference with the burst is that it's easier because of like the wall splat thing, or like not the wall splat itself, but the fact that you have those very high up corner combos lead to bad burst scenarios being more common. So, you know, you do a burst and then it was the wrong call and you get heavily punished for it. That's always been a thing, of course, but I feel like it's more common here to do a bad burst. That could just be
in the favor of the aggressor, then?
Yes.
In favor of the one doing the offense?
Yes.
Okay.
Like when I played Ram the Fall, and bursting Ram is not easy because she has... I don't want to go too technical into it. Like anyone who's played the game knows what I mean, just from me saying that. And that, of course, it's always been the case that like certain strings and such are hard to burst, but it feels like Ram can put you in that situation much more often than you have burst available. Because you're only going to have burst maximum 2 times a match, and that's if you use the first one early. Okay. So besides that, you have a lot of other things. You have the FD, which is faultless defense, which is you hold 2 buttons while you're blocking, and that burns meter, but it also means you take, I don't remember if it's reduced chip or 0 chip. I think it's 0 chip, so you don't take any chip at all, I believe, and it pushes a little bit more. The thing about that is, given how the game system works, it's very difficult for you to actually get proper meter if you're not the aggressor. So, given...
Sounds snowbally.
Yeah. So because of that, having the meter available to like actually keep the FD up for these like nightmare scenarios, probably not likely if you're in that position to begin with. And then you have things like they changed the YRC, like Yellow Roman Cancel. It was a completely different thing in Xrd. So when you talk about the 2 different games, they're 2 wildly different mechanics, even though they have the same name, which is essentially like kind of a V reversal, if we're looking at Street Fighter 5 terms. So that's the thing that exists. And you also have the very strangely changed instant block feature. So instant blocking is basically you block at the exact moment when you get hit, roughly.
Okay.
The window for doing this in Xrd was, I believe, 8 frames. So if you tapped back, then that was an 8-frame window, which would count as an instant block. Okay.
Okay.
And what instant block did is it reduced the pushback of the incoming attack, and it also reduced the frame advantage of it. So say someone did a move that was ±0, it could now possibly be -3 or something like that, and you would also be closer to them. So that was a way to mitigate very oppressive offense.
Sounds like the parry for the Street Fighter crowd.
Yeah, it's similar. Parries in Third Strike are interesting because you can actually do 2 types of parries, one which is a clean input and one where you actually hold the input. And the window is bigger than I think most people realize for a parry. I believe if you just tap, it's 10 frames. And if
I thought it was 2 frames.
No. It's much larger than that. Red parry is 2 frames. Or maybe even 1 frame. And if you hold it, I believe it's 6 frames. I can get blown up in the comments here, but it's big. It's bigger than you think. It is.
Comment on Nick's lack of knowledge.
Yeah, but it's bigger than you think anyway. So Instant Block was 8 frames in Xrd as far as I can remember. Instant Block now in Strive is 2 frames. So putting that into context with the parry, because you were like, oh, I thought the parry was 2 frames. Make that in your mind. Like, imagine that you're doing the, like, less clean input for a parry. That's still 6 frames. So this is a third of a parry, okay?
Okay.
And it does not change frame advantage at all anymore. What it does is change pushback. So say that Sol does a +3 move on block to you, and you actually manage to instant block it, which is extremely difficult because it's a 2-frame window. It's insane. You're not actually getting rewarded for this because he's still +3 and you're even closer to him.
Wait, you're even closer?
Yeah.
So
what you do when you do the instant block is you reduce the pushback from them on block. It's a way so you can punish certain moves that push you far away.
Okay, so the way this is set up right now, it sounds like there are no benefits from it, and it's just a total oversight or poor design choice. That can't be where we're at with a game like Strive.
There are definitely benefits to it, but given the tight window, it's not really applicable in matches for the majority of players. Even top players are probably not going to be able to do it consistently, but there will be certain moves that would normally push you very far back, but they're like -10 or something, and they would now be unsafe. Because of you doing it.
So what I'm kind of gathering here is that if there is an issue in terms of the balance of damage output, the ease of damage output, and essentially earning the kinds of damage or the lack thereof, like if you're the defender, earning the advantage or earning your escapes, things along those lines, the equation might add up to something that, well, in Street Fighter V, especially in the early times, I should say, well, the first couple of years, it was that it felt imbalanced and that it was much too heavily in the aggressor's favor, and that made the whole thing feel like kind of moot. It's just like, yeah, I can spend my time trying to do this, but the risk reward was not there, and that led to the whole thing feeling more of a sense of frustration, more negative feelings coming out of it, and there is like first of all your risk reward balance is always going to be kind of, that's a moving target depending on the game you're playing to a certain extent and what that looks like, and that's a detailed thing that we don't need to get too far into. But the idea is, if you have the right combination for your game's atmosphere, it might not be 100% fair, but it feels satisfying to do the routine motions and the interactions and things along those lines. And as far as I can tell, people seem very satisfied with Guilty Gear. Not totally, and obviously there, especially in a vanilla version, there's going to be some kinks, there's going to be some TODs that people don't want, but people are excited to engage and play, and I don't commonly hear that they're super upset about things, at least not in the way it felt like they were back in 2016 for the release of Street Fighter, and just how it either felt like you were barely getting away with a win by the seat of your pants and it was stressful, or it was very extremely frustratingly bad to lose. Does it feel like that, or is it still balanced in a way that it might not be balanced, but at least it's fun?
It's going to be different for every person, right? But from my general experience, a lot of the people who are enjoying Strive a lot now are people who came from Street Fighter V. I see a lot of Street Fighter V players picking it up, having a good time with it, and I think if you like Street Fighter V, it's going to be very easy to like Strive because you've already been through the rough parts, right? And you still enjoy the game, presumably, if you're still playing Street Fighter V. And as such, the frustrating aspects of Strive would not be as frustrating for you because you're already okay with it. I actually am seeing quite a lot of people be more frustrated, similar to what I saw in Street Fighter 5. But again, it's going to be different for every person. Like, anecdotal evidence isn't going to really offer much. But there are definitely people who are less enthused about the... how should I say? The way matches sway, so to speak, in Strive.
How often they perceive the more deserving, the more practiced, the better player winning.
And I think this is also very evident because if you look on Twitter, in general, people are pushing for longer sets in the game, and that's generally something you do when you feel it's fairly inconsistent. Like, nobody wants this to be a first to two game. Everyone is saying it should be first to three, some even saying first to four, and we've seen some top 8s go first to four, which I've never seen for any fighting game before.
Are the rounds really quick?
Sometimes they don't have to be. So it's kind of a TO nightmare in that sense. But yeah, I think that tells the tale itself, really, because going up to first to three instead of first to two is something you want in any game, because it heightens consistency and it makes it like more likely that the better player will win, right? But there's a very hard push for it in Strive, and I think that's because people are feeling that themselves.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I think so. But
we've talked about gameplay a lot here, and we can stay there, but I want to make sure to give at least a chance to say, is there anything along the lines of when you say Guilty Gear Strive is similar to SF5? SF5 had an incredibly rocky launch, and we are here still in the honeymoon phase of Strive. Is any of the comparison there in a poor launch, in like missing modes or missing parts of the game, or does that feel completely like a checkbox? It's really just gameplay that we're talking about.
It depends a bit on what you look at. I would say Strive is a much more complete experience than Street Fighter 5 was at its launch. You have the story mode, which is essentially a long movie. You have the arcade modes. You have robust training mode. You don't have trials. You have like different missions instead, but like their replacement for trials, so to speak. Obviously, the lobby is very controversial with good reason, but that's a choice, right? It's not like a lacking feature. This is a thing they've decided to go with. I think a lot of personality is missing, which I remember was also something people kind of felt from Street Fighter 5, because if you look at previous Guilty Gear games and also recent ArcSys undertakings such as Dragon Ball Fighters and Grand Blue Fantasy Versus, there are a lot of character-specific quotes and things like that. And Guilty Gear has been extremely good at this in the past. There's nothing like that at all right now.
What about in gameplay? Does it look like every player or every character is being played by the same player, or can you tell someone's playing a different soul?
I think it's less individual than it was in Xrd, for example, but it's more individual than in Street Fighter 5. I was commentating an event last weekend, which was Across the North, a Scandinavian or like Nordic online tournament. And in the grand finals, you had Svampen, very seasoned Guilty Gear veteran, up against Hiari, who is a world-class Eunice player. And they were both playing Ram. And I think you could very clearly tell that they were playing very different Rams. Okay. And being this early in the game, that is a good sign, of course, that you can already feel that from the players.
Okay. So what other gameplay aspects, if any, make it feel like the SF5 of Guilty Gear?
Less moves. They removed a lot of moves from a lot of characters. If you look at Chip's move list compared to like Xrd, probably like half of it is gone. Another good example is Anji, because this is another one of those things where the result is the same, even if the execution is different, because Street Fighter 5 removed the proximity normals, right? And also neutral jump normals being different. That's not a thing anymore. So in Street Fighter 5, a lot of moves disappeared just with the flick of a wrist, right? In Guilty Gear, they didn't do it quite that same way, but a lot of special moves are missing. I'm not sure if anyone in the roster has like everything they used to have. But if you look at Anji specifically, this is a character who used to have like 12 command normals. And I think he has 2 now? Something like that. So,
and those weren't replaced with something else?
No. So there are a lot less moves. They do still have proximity normals though. They do still have far and close. But yeah, the fact that, and that's what I mean by the same result but different execution. I think that's a thing in this discussion that gets lost, because people can't say, oh, they did, like, if they had removed proximity normals, you could easily say, oh, it's Street Fighter 5 of Guilty Gear. Just look, they did the same thing. They didn't do the same things, but they did other things that would lead to the same result, and they did that knowingly. Because if you look at the interviews with Daisuke, he's saying basically all the same things that Ono said before Street Fighter 5. So it's a deliberate choice, but they didn't want to go the exact same route as Street Fighter 5 because they didn't figure this probably doesn't work for Guilty Gear. Like, we don't want to remove proximity normals because we think that's a good part of the game, but we want to do something to mitigate the move list, kind of.
Well, I would say it did, in a lot of ways, it didn't work for Street Fighter 5, and then there had to be some corrections and such put into place.
Right.
Anything else? I do want to, while you're thinking on that, I do want to ask the people that are watching that have played. This is a very early phase in this game's life, and I want to hear from more than just Majin here. You know, do you feel like things are, would you say, training wheels in Guilty Gear, especially if you've played previous ones, and more so, the second part to that, does it feel like that takes away from the overall experience? Because I do believe you can have a simpler game. It's dangerous, but you can have a simpler game and still have it be fun and still have the better player win. It's just that you have to really fine tune because you're working with fewer things, fewer variables, and so therefore maybe a little less definition or resolution. But my question to the audience is, does it feel like Guilty Gear Strive is training wheels Guilty Gear, and does that take away from the fun factor of it?
Yeah. I don't know if there's really anything else. Maybe elaborate a bit on what I said earlier about the statement being offensive about like leveling the playing field. I think that's a statement that always sits wrong with me ever since Ono said it, and Daisuke didn't say it in the same way, but he said it in a like similar regard. And I think it's mainly because like these are the fans that supported you, right? These are the guys who made your Series B what it is today. They're the reason that you have all these tournaments that you're pushing for, all this esports and all that stuff. So why it feels to me like they're basically saying the time you put in, we want to remove that. We don't want that to be a factor. And that's what I meant earlier when I said like it feels offensive to hear. And I also think it's a completely what's a good word? Pointless goal. Because, like I said, you're never going to manage to do that for the high-level players, but you're screwing over the mid-level players. The people who are, like, competent at the game, but trying to get higher. Because now they're all of a sudden getting, like, blown up and getting frustrated. Yeah, because
there's the bottom 1%, there's everyone else that can lose to or beat each other, and then there's like the top 1%, who will win consistently, and that absolutely is how SF5 felt. And I agree with you that you could say it's offensive and that it's something that we don't want, for things to be simplified to the point where new players can win. That should not be the goal, that new players can win. The goal should more specifically, and this is very important, be that new players can do the things that are fun and feel a sense of satisfaction even while they are learning the game.
Yes.
And if you incentivize toward that specifically, and it's in that same ballpark, but it's a huge distinction. It's not, winning in and of itself is not what's fun. It's the journey. And I know that's a little bit of a cliche, but it applies here completely. It needs to be fun to do the things that lead to winning, and it needs to be possible and apparent of how to do those things. And that makes it harder. It's scary for a developer to have that task in front of you. It's a lot easier to say, oh, well, if we make the damage really high for everybody, everyone can feel good about whenever they eventually hit a punch, you know, something like that. But that's too low resolution, and it's ultimately going to harm your game and make it moot. But I think if you specifically make it fun to do the things that are going to help you level up, and apparent and obvious, that's a simplification that you can see. Oh, if I do this strategy of footsies or neutral, there's a reward, and that's the thing that makes me want to come back. I don't want to try to get to the win screen. I want to get into those scrambly situations where I have to make that decision or manipulate my opponent, and that process is fun. That's where you want to get it. So I'm really hoping that we go more in that direction, and that the developers of fighting games learn that specifically and pursue that over just simplification. Everyone can win. Don't you want to come and win? Come play. No, none of that. Get that out of here.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that sentiment. You want new players, old players to have fun. That is extremely important, and I think that's like the core of fighting games. That's how we all got into them to begin with. Nobody started playing fighting games without being like, damn, this is really fun.